The drill began like any other morning on the training field, with the air sharp and the recruits already exhausted before the first command was even given. She stood in line, uniform crisp but worn from weeks of relentless practice, focused on breathing and balance the way she had been taught. This was supposed to be a controlled combat simulation, designed to test awareness under pressure, nothing more. When the opposing trainee stepped in too close, she adjusted her stance, expecting a feint or a grab. Instead, there was a sudden tug, fabric slicing open with a harsh sound that cut through the noise of boots and shouted commands. For a split second, confusion froze her, not pain, not fear, but disbelief that the line of safety had been crossed so casually. The training knife was meant to mark hits, not to humiliate or endanger, and everyone on the field knew that rule by heart. As the cut uniform fell open at the seam, a ripple of shocked silence spread among the nearby trainees. Some looked away instinctively, others stared, unsure whether to continue the drill or stop. She felt heat rush to her face but forced herself to remain still, remembering the discipline drilled into her since day one. This was a test, she told herself, and how she responded mattered as much as any physical move. Still, something about the moment felt wrong, heavier than a simple mistake, like a boundary had been crossed without permission. The SEAL instructor had been watching from a distance, eyes missing nothing, posture relaxed but alert. He saw the cut, the hesitation, the subtle shift in energy on the field, and his expression changed instantly. Years of combat and command had trained him to recognize when a situation stopped being productive and started being dangerous. His hand came up, and his voice cut through the space with authority that allowed no argument. The command to halt echoed, sharp and final, freezing every trainee mid-motion. Dust settled around Boots as everyone snapped to attention, hearts pounding, unsure of what would come next. He walked onto the field slowly, deliberately, letting the silence do part of the work for him. His gaze moved from the torn uniform to the trainee holding the knife, then across the rest of the group. There was no shouting at first, no dramatic gestures, just a calm presence that somehow felt heavier than anger. He explained, in a measured tone, that training was about building skill and trust, not breaking dignity. Every drill had rules for a reason, and ignoring them didn't make anyone tougher, only reckless. The words sank in, not as punishment, but as a reminder of what this training was meant to create. Turning to her, the instructor asked if she was all right, not as a formality but as a genuine check. She answered clearly, standing straight despite the embarrassment still burning in her chest. He nodded once, approving not just her words but her composure. He reminded everyone watching that strength wasn't proven by exploiting a mistake or pushing past agreed limits. Real strength was control, especially when adrenaline was high. The lesson wasn't written on a board or shouted through a megaphone, but it settled deep into the minds of every person standing there. The trainee who had caused the cut was called forward, not to be publicly shamed, but to be corrected. The instructor explained exactly what went wrong, how a moment of carelessness or ego could lead to serious consequences in real operations. There were no insults, only clear expectations and firm boundaries. The weight of responsibility was made obvious, not just for that one person, but for everyone who shared the field. Training stopped not because of weakness, but because discipline demanded it. As the group was dismissed, temporarily, whispers followed them off the field, but they were different from the usual competitive chatter. This time, the talk was about respect, about how quickly things could go wrong, and about how the instructor had handled it. She adjusted her uniform, grateful for the pause, and felt a quiet resolve settle in. She hadn't been singled out as a problem, she had been protected as a teammate. That distinction mattered more than she realized at first. When training resumed later, the atmosphere had changed. Movements were sharper, awareness higher, and the casual sloppiness that sometimes crept in was gone. The instructor watched closely, offering corrections and guidance, reinforcing the idea that every action carried meaning. She felt stronger returning to the drill, not because the incident was forgotten, but because it had been addressed properly. The field felt safer, not easier, and that was exactly the point. By the end of the day, exhaustion weighed on everyone, but so did a deeper understanding of what they were becoming. This wasn't just about physical endurance or tactical skill, it was about character under pressure. The memory of the halted drill stayed with them, a reminder that leadership wasn't loud or cruel, but precise and fair. For her, it became a turning point, proof that she belonged in a place that valued discipline over dominance. Long after the sun dipped low and the field emptied, the lesson lingered. A single cut had stopped an entire drill, not because training was fragile, but because standards mattered. The SEAL instructor hadn't ended the moment with rage, but with clarity, reinforcing why those standards existed in the first place. In that instant, everyone learned that the true purpose of training was not to tear each other down, but to build a team strong enough to trust one another when it counted most.